recruiter priorities and calls. Recruiters are getting judged internally, their metrics internally on how their bonuses are being paid out are tied to any number of different metrics. And there's no way of really knowing which ones their commission structure is based on. Sometimes there's some recruiting firms that will count the number of live calls, connects that they make, not just the number of dials, but the number of connects that they make. Other ones are getting paid and incented based on the number of resumes that they receive, right? So they want to get your resume. They're going to tell you all about the great things that we've got, and we're going to tell you about all these great jobs and do all these things and send your resume in, and bloop, that's my number next, right? And maybe you don't get more calls from him. He just wanted your resume, or she just wanted your resume. Phone interviews. How many phone interviews did you send up? How many send outs did you get? For those of you who are not in recruiting, which I suspect is most people, so which is why you're on this call, to learn about what we do. A send out is we set up an interview for you. So when you see that term, a send out, that is recruiter speak for we created an interview, right? We set up an interview. It's confirmed on both sides. The candidate and the client have confirmed that they're going to interview at a certain day and time. So maybe we're being incented on how many of those we can set up per week, which might lead to setting up an interview for a job that you don't fit, right? Make sense? And maybe that's why those are happening. Job orders, how many job orders or search assignments did we get? Whether it's a good position or a bad position, maybe whether it's we found out all the information about that job or we didn't, it's a quality order or it's not. We're incented on all these different metrics, all right? Keeping in mind, most recruiters are working on commission only. Maybe we've got a draw or a very, very low base salary, but most recruiters, including myself, 100% commission. And so we've got metrics that we're tracking on all of these requirements, on all these different goals that we're trying to achieve. And all of them scale back to the number of times we dial the phone, right? So if I want to make 5 placements over the course of a month, I need to set up at least 15 send outs. Now, that's because for me, my interview to hire ratio is 3-to-1. Now, the industry average is 7-to-1. For the average recruiter, they have to set up 7 interviews before they make 1 placement. For mine, I'm a little bit more seasoned in my career. I've been doing this for a long time, 20 some years. Mine is 3-to-1. But to get 15 send outs, I've got to have at least 45 phone interviews or video interviews over the course of a month if I'm going to make 5 placements that month. To get 45 phone interviews, I need to make somewhere between 1,400 and 1,600 outbound calls that month. All right. Have you ever tried to plan 1,600 phone calls before, and how much time you could imagine it takes to research all those calls and then put them onto a planner and then make those calls? I talk to job seekers through my structure and how to structure a week and finding positions. And I'm asking them, hey, let's find 10 places you can call per day. So that's 50 per week, 50 per week. So maybe 200 calls over the course of a month. Recruiters are making 1,600 calls a month, especially if they're early on in their career. So when you call us and say, hey, let's get together for a quick cup of coffee so I can tell you all about myself. If they don't call you back, or they say, you know what, I would love to, and sincerely, I would love to have a lot of those calls, we just can't, just because we've only got so much time in a day. And the other recruiters on here, I'm sure can verify. I can't see if Foster or Tim or some of the other recruiters who I know attend a lot are on the call, but they can verify. Recruiters, we only work half days, right? Like I only work half days. I'm sure Foster and the rest, we only work half days. And it doesn't matter if it's the first 12 hours of the day or if it's the second 12 hours of the day, but we're only working 12 hours. That's it. All right. Over the course of a day. And I've tried to explain this a lot of different ways, and it never comes across nicely. So I'm going to try a different way, a more visual way here with some PowerPoint graphics. And I couldn't fit 12 little stopwatches up here. to make this animation work. But here's 4 different buckets of where I could spend my time today. The first bucket here is finding jobs that I can fill, right? If I can find some positions that I can then present to candidates, that's like money in the bank. All right. So I'm going to drop, at least a third of my day, a quarter of my day into that first bucket, because that equates to money for me. All right. The second bucket here is I need to then find people to fill those jobs, which is going to take me longer to find a good person that's qualified to send over to that client. So I need to put even more time into that second bucket. And then I got to do all the research to find which companies to call, to find which companies I need to be reaching out to. I got to put a couple hours to that. And for me personally, I do a lot of executive coaching, job search advisement for senior executives who are in transition. So I'm taking time on the phone with them. I write executive IT resumes for senior IT executives. That takes time. I got to put it there. And I do want to have some of those coffee meetings whenever I can. So I got to put at least some time toward that. All right. But if everyone who reached out and said, hey, can I just take 15 minutes of your time, 10 minutes of your time today to introduce myself, tell you about my background so that you can fill some positions that'll be valuable and worth your time as a recruiter to talk with me because I can fill your roles. Yes, I can do that. But in order to do that, I've got to take money out of one of these other buckets and put it in the coffee bucket. And if you're another person and another person and another person throughout the day, if I wanted to, I get enough requests per day that I could take every one of those little stopwatches and pile it into that other bucket. And not to say that's not valuable. Time and information building my network is, and that's what I get paid to do, to build my network. But those other buckets for sure are going to lead to income for a commission-based person. These other buckets might lead to income at some point, maybe perhaps down the road, right? So in the recruiter's eyes, I'm watching all my time turn into little drops falling out of the bottom of that bucket. And as somebody who has experienced and done this many times, this is how my buckets end up looking at the end of the day. Of my bucket for really good jobs that I have that I can present to job seekers, that bucket's empty. The qualified people that I've recruited to present on those jobs, that bucket's empty. The time that I have available for coaching, so people to hire me for coaching or companies to hire me to help them with their recruiting process, that bucket is empty. And writing resumes, that bucket's empty. But I got a bucket full of people who are really talented who don't fit any of my jobs. All right, does that make sense? So if you ask a recruiter for coffee and they don't respond at all, or if you don't fit their job, and they don't have any openings at that particular moment, if they don't call you back, this is why. They could pick up the phone and call 150 people today to tell them they don't fit the job. Should they do that? Or should they go find a job that they can call you and tell you about? Right? It's going to be more valuable for you if they don't call you back. And I'll tell you, some of the top trainers in the country, one of my favorite trainers in the country, where she said, listen, if you're going to call people back to tell them they don't fit your job, I'll tell you what, try this just for a week. Take a $50 bill out of your pocket, put it in an envelope, take the time to address it by hand, put a stamp on it, and mail it to them. Just do that instead of calling them back, and watch how much more money you make than you would have, than you normally make by calling all of those people back, right? It should put a visual to the thing to tell recruiters don't call people back. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I will call people back who I've got in the process, but I won't necessarily have those meet and greet conversations anyway, with every single person who reaches out. So for me, I created a clone for anybody in IT who has had a meet and greet conversation with me, and I introduce him to Paul Tronick. Very seriously, he's on the page, and you can fill out an online profile for me, and I'll apologize and say, hey, I wish we could talk, ahead of time, and I appreciate your understanding with us having this conversation electronically. But if you talk to Paul Tronick, I can make more calls to more employers and have more jobs to present to you, and I'll be more effective for you as a recruiter. And I even created that little whatever you want to call it, which my wife says it gives her nightmares. It creeps her out, but I love it. I think it's pretty cool, whatever that's worth. So